Jasmine Washington stood trembling before the airline tribunal, tears streaming down her face as they read the verdict. 3 months ago, she'd been just another passenger with a crying baby. Now she held the career of America's most famous flight attendant in her hands. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever experienced unfair treatment while traveling, and subscribe to hear more true stories of everyday people standing up against injustice. Now let's rewind to see how a routine flight turned into a national controversy. The morning of April 15th started like any other for Jasmine Washington, a 35-year-old marketing executive from Atlanta. As a successful black single mother to 6-month-old Elijah, she had perfected the art of multitasking, feeding her son while reviewing presentation slides, changing diapers between client calls, and somehow managing to look put together despite functioning on 4 hours of sleep. Today was different, though. Jasmine had a crucial in-person meeting with a potential client in Los Angeles that could secure her team's biggest account of the year. She'd arranged childcare that fell through at the last minute, forcing her to bring Elijah along. Her mother would meet them in LA to watch him during the meeting. "You can do this," Jasmine whispered to herself as she approached the Ameristar Airlines gate for Flight 1242. She'd splurged on premium economy tickets, hoping the extra space would make traveling with an infant easier. The judgmental looks began immediately. A businessman in an expensive suit sighed loudly when he realized he'd be seated near a baby. 2 college-aged girls whispered and giggled as Jasmine struggled to collapse her stroller while holding Elijah. "Need help with that?" a gate agent asked half-heartedly, already turning away before Jasmine could respond. Once aboard, Jasmine settled into her seat, relieved to find the middle seat empty beside her. She'd prepared everything meticulously: toys, pacifiers, bottles, formula, all organized in her diaper bag for easy access. Elijah, usually a calm baby, had been fussy all morning. The change in routine and pressure from the ascending plane made him even more uncomfortable. About 30 minutes into the flight, Elijah began crying inconsolably. Jasmine tried everything in her repertoire of soothing techniques, but nothing worked. He needed his bottle, but the formula required warm water. Jasmine pressed the call button, and after several minutes, flight attendant Bethany Reynolds appeared. At 48, Bethany was a 22-year veteran of Ameristar, her perfectly pressed uniform and immaculate blonde updo projecting authority. "Could I please get some warm water for his bottle?" Jasmine asked, raising her voice slightly over Elijah's cries. Bethany's expression hardened. "You should have prepared that before boarding. Proper planning prevents these situations," she said, making no move to help. "I understand, but I couldn't predict when he'd be hungry, and the bottles can't stay warm for hours," Jasmine explained patiently, bouncing Elijah gently. "We're serving first-class passengers right now. You'll need to wait," Bethany replied curtly before walking away. Jasmine tried to remain calm, but Elijah's cries intensified. 20 minutes later, she noticed Bethany rushing to help a white mother with a baby in the same section. The attendant returned with warm water immediately and even offered a blanket. Shocked, Jasmine pressed the call button again. When Bethany returned, her annoyance was palpable. "I noticed you helped another mother right away. I've been waiting for almost half an hour," Jasmine said, keeping her voice steady. Bethany's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm busy with paying customers in first class. We'll get to you when we can." "I'm a paying customer too," Jasmine replied, pulling out her premium economy ticket. "All I need is warm water. If you continue to be difficult, I'll have to report a disturbance to the captain," Bethany threatened, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Jasmine felt heat rising to her face, aware of the stares from surrounding passengers. She'd experienced discrimination before, but never so blatantly when she was just trying to care for her child. What Jasmine didn't notice was 73-year-old Patricia Fleming, a white woman with silver hair in the row behind her, quietly recording the interaction on her phone. Elijah's cries grew louder as hunger and discomfort overwhelmed him. Passengers began shifting uncomfortably, some sending annoyed glances in Jasmine's direction. "Please," Jasmine finally said, her voice cracking with emotion. My baby is hungry. I'm just asking for the same treatment you gave the other mother. You people always think you're being treated differently, Bethany muttered, just loud enough for Jasmine to hear. Before Jasmine could respond, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to remind all passengers that cooperation with crew instructions is mandatory for safety. Any disruptions may result in consequences upon landing. The message wasn't explicitly directed at Jasmine, but the timing made it clear. She sank back into her seat, feeling utterly humiliated, trapped, and discriminated against at 30,000 feet with nowhere to go and no one to help her or her crying baby. As passengers filed off Ameristar Flight 1242 at LAX, Jasmine Washington moved slowly, exhausted from the 3-hour ordeal. Elijah had finally fallen asleep, his tiny face still bearing tear streaks from crying most of the flight. Without the warm formula, Jasmine had resorted to nursing him discreetly beneath a blanket, earning more disapproving glances from Bethany each time she passed. "Excuse me, dear." A gentle tap on Jasmine's shoulder made her turn around. The silver-haired woman who'd been sitting behind her stood there, clutching an expensive leather handbag. "My name is Patricia Fleming. Do you have a moment to talk?" Jasmine hesitated, emotionally drained and eager to meet her mother at baggage claim. "I really need to get going." "I understand," Patricia said, her voice lowered. "But I recorded what happened with that flight attendant. What she did wasn't right, and you should have evidence." Jasmine's eyes widened as Patricia held up her phone, showing a clear video of the interaction. In the terminal's bright lighting, the discrimination was even more obvious than it had felt in the moment. "I was a civil rights attorney for 40 years, Patricia explained. "I recognize injustice when I see it. That young white mother got immediate service while you were treated abominably." They found a quiet corner in the terminal where Patricia showed Jasmine the complete recording. There it was in high definition. Bethany's dismissive tone, the preferential treatment, and even the muttered, "you people," comment that Jasmine had heard but couldn't prove. "You should file a formal complaint," Patricia urged, transferring the video to Jasmine's phone. Jasmine sighed, shifting Elijah to her other shoulder. "I don't know if it's worth it. I'll just be labeled an angry black woman making trouble. I can't afford any negative attention with my career." Patricia's eyes softened. "That's exactly what they count on. Silence. I've seen too many people walk away because fighting seems harder than accepting mistreatment." Reluctantly, Jasmine agreed to document the incident properly. Patricia helped her note details while they were fresh: flight number, time, witnesses, exact quotes. The older woman's methodical approach reminded Jasmine of preparing a marketing campaign, documenting every interaction point. "Take a few days to think about it," Patricia said, handing Jasmine her business card. "But don't wait too long. Airlines have video surveillance that conveniently goes missing when complaints arise." That night, after settling into her hotel with her mother watching Elijah, Jasmine searched online for information about Ameristar's complaint process. What she found instead were multiple similar complaints buried in airline review forums, several specifically mentioning a blonde flight attendant on Atlanta routes who selected which passengers deserved prompt service. When Jasmine posted about her experience in a private social media group for professional black women, the responses discouraged her from pursuing action. "Save your energy, girl. Nothing ever changes. They'll find a way to blame you. Is this battle really worth it with everything else on your plate?" Her best friend Tanya Bennett called immediately after seeing the post. As another black single mother, Tanya had experienced something similar on a different airline last year. "I filed a complaint and they dismissed it completely," Tanya explained. "Said there was insufficient evidence despite multiple witnesses. It became my word against a 20-year employee." But Tanya didn't just offer discouragement. She introduced Jasmine to an online advocacy group focused on exposing discrimination in the aviation industry. The group's members included former airline employees, frequent flyers, and civil rights advocates who had successfully pushed for policy changes. Through this network, Jasmine discovered something disturbing. Bethany Reynolds wasn't just any flight attendant. She had a reputation. In crew circles, some called her the selector, for her pattern of providing significantly different service levels based on who she deemed deserving. Several former Ameristar employees confirmed they'd witnessed her behavior, but feared reporting it given her connections to senior management. "Documentation is your power," explained Xavier Mitchell, a former airline customer service manager in the group. "They'll try to make you doubt yourself, but with video evidence, they can't gaslight you." Xavier helped Jasmine craft a formal complaint that was professional, factual, and impossible to dismiss as emotional exaggeration. The complaint detailed the incident chronologically, referenced the video evidence, and requested specific remedies: an apology, anti-bias training for staff, and a review of how discrimination complaints were handled. As Jasmine prepared to submit the complaint, Patricia Fleming called to check on her. "Remember, dear, this isn't just about one bad day on a plane. It's about all the people who face this treatment without having a former attorney behind them or the confidence to speak up. Sometimes the battles we fight aren't just for ourselves." With that perspective, Jasmine took a deep breath and hit send on her complaint to Ameristar's customer service department. When the automated email arrived from Ameristar Airlines, "Thank you for your feedback. Your concerns matter to us." Jasmine Washington initially felt hopeful. The message promised a response within 5 business days, suggesting her meticulously documented complaint would receive proper attention. 5 days turned into 10. 10 became 15. After 3 weeks with no substantive response, Jasmine began making follow-up calls to Ameristar's customer service line, each one more frustrating than the last. "We have no record of your complaint," the first representative claimed, despite Jasmine having a confirmation number. "These matters take time to investigate," another explained after Jasmine insisted on speaking to a supervisor. "I'll personally escalate this to our review team," promised a third representative, sounding sincere but ultimately delivering nothing. By the 6th week, the pattern became clear. Ameristar was stonewalling her, hoping she would give up and go away. Each representative seemed trained to placate without action, offering vague assurances while the trail grew colder. Have you ever been ignored by a company after filing a legitimate complaint? Comment number 1. If you've experienced the frustration of corporate stonewalling, and don't forget to like this video if you believe companies should be held accountable for discrimination. How long do you think big corporations should be allowed to investigate serious complaints before taking action? Subscribe to find out what Jasmine did next when faced with this wall of silence. "I understand your concern about the incident from 2 months ago," said Brenda, the latest customer service representative. "However, our internal review found no evidence of policy violations. We consider this matter closed." Something inside Jasmine snapped. "Closed? I have video evidence. Video recordings on aircraft without crew permission violate our privacy policies," Brenda replied smoothly. "Perhaps you misinterpreted normal service variations." That evening, after putting Elijah to bed, Jasmine made a decision. Opening her laptop, she edited a 30-second clip from Patricia's recording that clearly showed the discriminatory treatment, uploaded it to her rarely used Twitter account, and tagged Ameristar Airlines with a simple question: "Why does your flight attendant immediately help a white mother but threaten a black mother for requesting the same assistance?" The post accumulated 5,000 retweets by morning. By lunchtime, it had passed 50,000, with comments from people sharing similar experiences. Major news websites embedded the clip in articles with headlines like, "Flying While Black, Mother Exposes Airline Discrimination." Ameristar's PR team contacted Jasmine within hours, their urgency a stark contrast to the previous weeks of silence. "We take these allegations extremely seriously," said Ryan Peters, the airline's director of public relations, his voice tight with controlled panic. "As a goodwill gesture, we'd like to offer you flight vouchers for future travel." "I don't want vouchers," Jasmine replied. "I want accountability and policy changes to ensure this doesn't happen to other passengers." "Ms. Washington, we understand your frustration, but our internal investigation suggests you may have misinterpreted normal service variations," Peters said, using the exact phrase from the customer service script. Flight attendants must prioritize service based on multiple factors. The video shows otherwise, Jasmine countered. 2 mothers in the same cabin class requested the same service. One received immediate help while I was threatened for asking. The conversation continued in circles, with Peters insisting that without context, the video could be misleading. He suggested that perhaps Bethany had been responding to an emergency elsewhere, or that Jasmine's tone had been confrontational, classic gaslighting tactics that made Jasmine question her own experience despite the clear evidence. As the call ended, Peter's tone changed subtly. We should also note that sharing potentially defamatory content could expose you to legal liability. For everyone's benefit, we hope we can resolve this matter privately. The thinly veiled threat sent a chill through Jasmine. She wasn't a lawyer, but she recognized intimidation tactics from her marketing work with difficult clients. They weren't offering resolution, they were offering silence. That same week, Jasmine's boss called her into his office. A major potential client had recognized her from the viral story and expressed concerns about working with someone generating controversy. Though her boss was supportive personally, the message was clear. Her professional reputation was suffering. Later that day, Jasmine received an anonymous email containing an internal Ameristar memo that had apparently been leaked by an employee sympathetic to her situation. The document outlined a strategy to discredit her as a difficult passenger seeking attention and included talking points for representatives to use if media inquired. Ameristar Airlines proudly serves a diverse customer base. Isolated incident not reflective of our values. Without complete context, short video clips can be misleading. The memo confirmed what Jasmine had suspected. The company was more concerned with protecting its image than addressing discrimination. They were waiting for the story to die down while actively working to undermine her credibility. That night, as Elijah slept peacefully in his crib, Jasmine sat on her living room floor surrounded by printouts of emails, notes from phone calls, and screenshots of social media responses. The evidence of institutional gaslighting was overwhelming. What had started as one terrible flight experience had evolved into a disturbing glimpse into how corporations shield themselves from accountability. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Fleming. "Don't let them wear you down. That's their strategy. What you need is to go higher up the chain." Jasmine stared at the message. A new determination forming. Ameristar's customer service and PR departments had failed her. Perhaps it was time to take her case directly to those with the power to make real changes. The invitation to speak at the Atlanta chapter of the Black Professional Women's Association came unexpectedly. The organization's president had seen Jasmine's story and believed her experience reflected challenges many members faced, navigating spaces where subtle discrimination was routinely denied or minimized. "I'm not an activist," Jasmine protested during the initial call. "I'm just a mom who wanted warm formula for my baby." "That's exactly why your story resonates," the president insisted. "You weren't looking for trouble. Trouble found you because of biases so normalized they're nearly invisible, until they're not." Standing before 60 accomplished Black women in a downtown hotel conference room, Jasmine felt surprisingly calm. She'd given countless marketing presentations, but this was different. This was personal. She shared her experience chronologically, emphasizing not just what happened on the plane, but the subsequent corporate response designed to make her doubt herself. "They rely on our silence," she concluded. "They count on us being too busy, too tired, or too afraid of seeming difficult to push back." The discussion that followed was cathartic, with many women sharing similar experiences across industries. What Jasmine didn't expect was for Vanessa Carpenter to approach her afterward. "I'm William Harrison's executive assistant," Vanessa said quietly, referring to Ameristar's CEO. "What you experienced isn't isolated. There's a pattern of discrimination complaints being buried before they reach senior leadership." Over coffee the next morning, Vanessa explained the company's internal complaint process. Everything gets filtered through middle management. They're incentivized to minimize problems, not solve them. Most discrimination reports are recategorized as customer satisfaction issues or service misunderstandings before executives ever see them. So, Harrison has no idea, Jasmine asked skeptically. He knows there are occasional issues, but not the extent, Vanessa replied. The numbers he sees are manipulated. What executives don't know, they can plausibly deny. This conversation marked a turning point for Jasmine. Her goals shifted from seeking personal resolution to exposing a system designed to hide discrimination. This wasn't just about one flight attendant's bias or one mother's humiliation. It was about institutional practices that perpetuated inequality while maintaining plausible deniability. With renewed purpose, Jasmine began strategically sharing her story. When media outlets requested interviews, she declined the sensationalistic ones and instead spoke with Imani Taylor, a respected black female journalist known for thoughtful reporting on systemic inequalities. The resulting feature, More Than a Bad Flight: How Corporate America Silences Discrimination Complaints, went viral, spawning the hashtag #HatFlyingWhileBlack. The story resonated far beyond Jasmine's individual experience, becoming a catalyst for others to share similar accounts across various airlines. Within days, 3 other passengers from Flight 1242 contacted Jasmine. One had additional cell phone footage showing Bethany's clearly different treatment of passengers based on race. Another had overheard the flight attendant making disparaging comments about Jasmine to another crew member during the beverage service. Using her marketing expertise, Jasmine organized these testimonials into a compelling narrative about systemic discrimination. She wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was documenting a pattern that couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding or isolated incident. This growing platform came with complications. At work, Jasmine noticed colleagues becoming distant. Her boss called her in for another conversation. "Some of the leadership team are uncomfortable with your growing public profile," he explained apologetically. "They're worried about association with controversy." "Is exposing discrimination controversial?" Jasmine asked. "In theory, no. In practice," he shrugged. "Just be careful." The warning was clear. Her professional standing was at risk. Yet rather than intimidating her into silence, it strengthened her resolve. If she, with her education, evidence, and articulation, could be pressured to stay quiet, what chance did others have? Through Vanessa, Jasmine learned that Ameristar's executives were monitoring the situation but still treating it as a PR problem rather than an opportunity for meaningful change. The company had hired a crisis management firm and was preparing a public statement reaffirming their commitment to diversity without addressing specific allegations. "They're waiting for the news cycle to move on," Vanessa explained during another covert meeting. "Standard corporate playbook." "Then we need to change the game," Jasmine replied, an idea forming. If middle management was the barrier between truth and accountability, then Jasmine needed to bypass them entirely. With Vanessa's help, she began preparing to take her case directly to CEO William Harrison, the one person with unquestionable authority to address both the specific incident and the systemic issues it revealed. "He's actually not a bad person," Vanessa insisted. "But he's surrounded by people whose jobs depend on telling him everything's under control." That night, Jasmine drafted the most important email of her life. No PR spin, no emotional appeals, just facts, evidence, and a clear call for accountability that couldn't be delegated away or dismissed with corporate platitudes. As she typed, she realized she was no longer just a passenger who had been mistreated. She had found her voice as an advocate for change, using the very skills that made her successful in marketing, persuasion, evidence-based argumentation, and strategic communication to challenge a system built to resist transformation. Before hitting send, she took a deep breath and added one final line. "Mr. Harrison, this isn't just about getting justice for myself. It's about ensuring that every passenger on your airlines receives equal treatment, regardless of their race. The choice before you isn't whether to address this incident, but whether you'll be remembered as the CEO who confronted discrimination or the one who permitted it." William Harrison's corner office on the 30th floor of Ameristar's headquarters offered panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline. At 58, the silver-haired executive had spent 3 decades climbing the corporate ladder, the last 7 as CEO of the nation's 4th-largest airline. His desk, usually organized with military precision, now overflowed with printouts of social media metrics, press clippings, and analyst reports, all centered around what staff now called the Washington situation. Harrison rubbed his temples, recalling the unusual email that had arrived in his private account 2 days earlier, an address known to fewer than 10 people. Somehow, Jasmine Washington had obtained it, bypassing the layers of gatekeepers paid to shield him from direct complaints. Under normal circumstances, he would have forwarded it to his assistant with instructions to send a standard response. But something about the message's calm, factual tone had compelled him to watch the attached video himself rather than delegating. What he saw disturbed him. The footage clearly showed Bethany Reynolds, one of Ameristar's most senior flight attendants, providing immediate assistance to a white mother while dismissing Jasmine Washington's identical request. The contrast was undeniable, as was Bethany's condescending tone and thinly veiled threat. More troubling still was the evidence Washington provided of the company's subsequent cover-up. Screenshots of dismissive responses, the leaked internal memo outlining strategies to discredit her, and statements from other passengers confirming her account. "Sir?" His executive assistant, Vanessa Carpenter, appeared at the door. "The board members are asking about our response strategy." Harrison sighed. "What's legal saying?" "They're split. Some want to settle quietly with a non-disclosure agreement. Others think defending Bethany is safer from a labor relations standpoint." She hesitated. "There's also concern about precedent if we discipline a long-term employee based on a social media campaign. And if the employee clearly discriminated against a passenger, what precedent does ignoring that set?" Harrison asked, surprising himself with the sharpness in his voice. The situation presented a genuine dilemma. Bethany Reynolds had been with Ameristar for 22 years, served as union representative, and had connections throughout the industry. She was also personal friends with 2 board members. Disciplining her would create internal backlash and potentially a wrongful termination lawsuit. Yet the evidence of her misconduct was compelling, and the company's subsequent mishandling made the situation exponentially worse. Harrison prided himself on running an airline that valued integrity. The marketing materials all proclaimed Ameristar's commitment to serving every passenger with dignity and respect. "The board's concerns are noted," Harrison said finally, "but I need to see this for myself. Arrange a confidential meeting with Ms. Washington. No legal team, no PR handlers, just us." Vanessa nodded, not looking particularly surprised. "I'll make it happen." 2 days later, Jasmine Washington entered a private conference room at a neutral location, a downtown law firm where neither she nor Harrison would be recognized. She had dressed professionally in a navy suit, projecting confidence despite the butterflies in her stomach. Harrison arrived precisely on time, accompanied only by Vanessa. After brief introductions, he got straight to the point. "Ms. Washington, I've reviewed your evidence personally. What happened on that flight was unacceptable, and our company's response afterward was equally troubling." Jasmine had prepared for denials, excuses, or settlement offers, not this straightforward acknowledgement. For a moment, she was speechless. Harrison continued, "I want to understand something that wasn't clear from the video. Had you interacted with Ms. Reynolds before she denied your request? Was there any prior conflict?" "None," Jasmine replied, regaining her composure. "The first time I spoke with her was when I requested warm water for my son's formula." Harrison nodded, making notes. "And since then, has anyone from Ameristar attempted to address your concerns substantively, rather than dismissing them?" "No. Every response has minimized what happened or suggested I misinterpreted normal service variations." Jasmine referenced the documentation she'd compiled. "Your company has been consistent in defending the indefensible." For nearly 2 hours, they discussed the incident, the subsequent cover-up, and the broader implications. Harrison asked thoughtful questions that suggested he was genuinely trying to understand rather than build a defense. "We have a problem," he admitted finally. "Not just with this incident, but with how we handle discrimination complaints generally. Our processes are clearly broken." "Why tell me this?" Jasmine asked. "Your legal team would probably advise against such candor." Harrison smiled wryly. "They would, but I'm trying to run an airline, not just manage liabilities. The truth is, Ms. Washington, we've struggled with diversity issues for years. Our customer-facing staff doesn't reflect our passenger demographics, and our corporate culture remains predominantly white and male, despite recruitment efforts." He explained the challenges of transforming a decades-old company culture, the resistance from entrenched interests, and the difficulty of acknowledging problems without creating legal exposure. "That's why discrimination complaints get buried," Jasmine realized. "Admitting the problem creates liability." "Exactly. But managing optics rather than addressing reality clearly isn't working either." Harrison leaned forward. "What would meaningful resolution look like to you?" Jasmine had anticipated this question. "I'm not interested in financial settlement or special treatment. What I want is systemic change to prevent this from happening to others." She outlined a collaborative approach, using her experience as a case study for improved training, revamping the complaint process to ensure transparency, and establishing clear consequences for discriminatory behavior regardless of seniority. "This could be an opportunity, not just a crisis," she suggested. "Ameristar could lead the industry in addressing issues most airlines pretend don't exist." Harrison studied her thoughtfully. "You're not what I expected, Ms. Washington." "What did you expect? Someone looking for a payout or publicity? You're proposing a partnership." The meeting concluded with Harrison committing to a thorough investigation and promising to keep Jasmine informed of findings and actions, an unprecedented level of transparency for such cases. As they prepared to leave, Harrison asked one final question. "Why did you contact me directly rather than taking legal action immediately? Most people in your position would have hired an attorney." Jasmine considered this. "Because lawsuits focus on compensation, not correction. I don't want Ameristar's money. I want your airline to be a place where my son can fly without experiencing what I did." Harrison nodded slowly. "I'll be in touch within the week with concrete next steps." As Jasmine left the meeting, she felt cautiously optimistic for the first time since the incident. Harrison seemed genuinely committed to addressing both her specific complaint and the underlying issues. Whether that commitment would translate into meaningful action remained to be seen. What she didn't anticipate was how quickly their private conversation would become public, or the firestorm that would follow. The headline blazed across the Business Insider website. "Ameristar CEO secretly meets with discrimination complainant, admits systemic problems." Accompanying the article was a grainy photo of Jasmine and Harrison leaving the downtown law office, clearly taken surreptitiously from across the street. Jasmine's phone began ringing at 5:43 a.m. It was Vanessa Carpenter, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Someone leaked details of your meeting with Harrison. The board is in emergency session and Bethany Reynolds just gave an exclusive interview to Morning America. It's bad, Jasmine. Really bad." Fumbling for her remote, Jasmine turned on her television to see Bethany Reynolds dabbing tears from her eyes as the morning show host offered a sympathetic expression. 22 years of dedicated service," Bethany was saying, her voice breaking. "And now my career and reputation are being destroyed by a social media mob because one passenger didn't get the instant service she demanded." The host nodded gravely. "You're describing what many call cancel culture. One accusation goes viral, and suddenly decades of work mean nothing." Bethany nodded tearfully. "Exactly. I've served thousands of passengers of all backgrounds with the same professional courtesy. Now I'm being portrayed as a racist because of a 30-second video taken out of context during a particularly busy flight." The segment continued with Bethany describing how she'd received death threats, had to move temporarily for safety, and was suffering from anxiety and insomnia. The hosts never questioned her version of events or mentioned the video evidence contradicting her claims. "They're rewriting the narrative," Vanessa explained when Jasmine called back. Someone on the board leaked details of your meeting to shift focus from the discrimination to Harrison going around proper channels. They're positioning Bethany as the victim. Within hours, the story transformed. Conservative media outlets ran headlines like, "Woke CEO throws veteran employee under bus," and "Social media accusation destroys woman's career." Online comment sections filled with people defending Bethany without having seen the original video evidence. By afternoon, protesters had gathered outside Ameristar's headquarters with signs reading, "Stand with Bethany," and "Stop the woke agenda." A counter-protest formed across the street, creating a tense standoff that local news covered live. Have you ever seen how quickly the victim can be turned into the villain when powerful interests get involved? Comment number 1 if you think corporations often create fake outrage to distract from real issues, and hit that like button if you believe we need more transparency when discrimination occurs. What would you do if you were Jasmine, suddenly cast as the aggressor rather than the victim? Subscribe to find out how this corporate gaslighting campaign continues to unfold. That evening, Jasmine's doorbell rang. When she checked the security camera, she saw 2 news vans parked on her street and a reporter standing on her porch. She turned off the lights and retreated to the back of her house, calling Tanya in panic. "Don't engage," her friend advised. "They want to provoke a reaction they can spin negatively." Overnight, things escalated. Anonymous accounts posted Jasmine's home address and workplace online. Her email filled with hateful messages, some containing explicit threats. The company where she worked received calls demanding her termination. Worst of all, Elijah developed a fever amid the stress, adding to Jasmine's burden as she attempted to care for her sick child while navigating a media firestorm she never anticipated. When she didn't show up for work the next day, her boss called with news that further devastated her. "The executive team has decided to place you on administrative leave," he said apologetically. "Just until this blows over. They're concerned about disruption to the workplace." "Disruption I didn't create," Jasmine pointed out, fighting back tears. "I know, it's not fair, but they're thinking about the company's interests." As Jasmine researched home security systems she couldn't really afford, Patricia Fleming called with a surprising development. "Former passengers are coming forward, dear," the older woman explained. "Not just from your flight, but others who've had encounters with this Bethany person. There's a pattern emerging." Indeed, social media had become a battleground of competing narratives. While Bethany's supporters dominated conservative outlets, passengers from previous flights began sharing stories on Twitter and TikTok about their experiences with the same flight attendant. "She told my hijabi sister that no additional pillows were available, then gave 3 to the passenger behind us. I watched her serve every white passenger in the row before acknowledging me, even though I requested assistance first. When my son spilled his drink, she rolled her eyes and said, 'Some people shouldn't travel with children,' loud enough for everyone to hear." More significantly, current and former Ameristar employees began speaking anonymously to journalists, revealing that Bethany was known internally as the Selector for her practice of providing dramatically different service levels based on her personal assessment of passengers. "It was an open secret," one flight attendant told a transportation blog. "Some crew members refused to work with her because they didn't want to be associated with her behavior, but management always protected her." Another revealed, "She has connections to multiple board members. Complaints about her would mysteriously disappear from the system." As these stories multiplied, Jasmine discovered something unexpected. Bethany Reynolds wasn't just any senior flight attendant. Her brother-in-law was James Whitfield, Ameristar's vice president of operations and a close friend of 2 board members. This connection explained why previous complaints had been buried, and why the company had initially worked so hard to discredit Jasmine rather than addressing the incident. The revelation gave Jasmine leverage, but also made her situation more dangerous. She was no longer challenging just one biased employee, but a network of power and influence within the company. On the 5th day of what media now called Airline Gate, Bethany's supporters organized a larger protest outside Ameristar headquarters, demanding Harrison's resignation for betraying a loyal employee and capitulating to social media pressure. Watching the coverage from her living room, Jasmine felt a strange mix of anger and vindication. The protest itself demonstrated the privilege Bethany enjoyed, the ability to mobilize support and shift the narrative despite clear evidence of wrongdoing. Few employees of color could count on such institutional protection. As Elijah finally recovered from his fever, Jasmine made a decision. She wouldn't engage with the media circus or respond to Bethany's tearful interviews. Instead, she would focus on supporting the internal investigation that Harrison had promised, assuming it was still happening amid the backlash. That evening, she received an encrypted message from Vanessa. Investigation proceeding despite pressure. Harrison standing firm. New developments coming. Stay strong. The cryptic message offered a glimmer of hope. Despite the orchestrated campaign to recast Bethany as the victim, someone inside Ameristar was still pursuing the truth. While media attention focused on the public spectacle of protests and counter-protests outside Ameristar's headquarters, a more consequential process was unfolding behind closed doors. CEO William Harrison had appointed Darius Martinez, the company's recently hired diversity officer with a background in employment law, to lead an internal investigation into both Jasmine's specific complaint and the broader handling of discrimination issues. Martinez, a 42-year-old former prosecutor with a reputation for uncompromising integrity, approached the assignment with methodical precision. He assembled a small team sworn to confidentiality and established a secure digital workspace isolated from the company's main systems to prevent leaks or interference. "Our mandate is truth, not damage control," he told his team during their first meeting. "The CEO wants facts, regardless of where they lead." The investigation began with a comprehensive review of Jasmine Washington's complaint, including the video evidence, subsequent communications, and the company's internal handling of the situation. Martinez personally interviewed the flight crew, nearby passengers, and customer service representatives who had responded to Jasmine's initial complaints. What emerged was a troubling pattern. Several crew members admitted witnessing Bethany Reynolds' differential treatment of passengers but had remained silent out of fear of retaliation. Reynolds had significant influence within the flight attendants' union and close relationships with senior management. She made it clear that crossing her could affect schedules, routes, even promotion opportunities, explained one flight attendant who requested anonymity. "Most of us just tried to compensate by providing extra attention to passengers she neglected." Martinez expanded the investigation to examine Reynolds' broader history with the airline. The statistical evidence was damning. Complaints against Reynolds were disproportionately filed by passengers of color, particularly black women. Yet her personnel file contained glowing performance reviews and multiple commendations. The discrepancy led Martinez to a disturbing discovery: a shadow system for handling certain types of complaints. Through forensic analysis of the company's customer service database, his team found that complaints specifically mentioning potential discrimination were routinely flagged for special handling by a small team reporting directly to Thomas Williams, Reynolds' supervisor and brother-in-law, to James Whitfield, the VP of Operations. These complaints were systematically downgraded in severity, recategorized as customer satisfaction issues rather than potential civil rights violations, or simply marked resolved without actual investigation. In several cases, documentation had been altered to remove specific allegations of racial bias before being entered into the permanent record. One customer service representative broke down during her interview with Martinez. "We were trained to use specific language to make complainants doubt themselves," she admitted. Phrases like, "perhaps you misinterpreted," or "service variations occur for many reasons," were part of our script for handling discrimination complaints. Martinez also discovered that Ameristar's formal anti-discrimination policies were technically sound, but practically unenforceable. The reporting mechanisms required complainants to navigate a labyrinthine process that few had the persistence to complete. Those who did found their complaints evaluated by the very departments implicated in the problems. "It's a perfect system for maintaining plausible deniability," Martinez explained to Harrison during a private briefing. Senior leadership can truthfully say they rarely see discrimination complaints because the system is designed to ensure they never reach this level. The investigation extended beyond Reynolds to examine the airline's broader culture. Through anonymous surveys and confidential interviews, Martinez documented a widespread perception among minority employees that advancement opportunities were limited and that reporting discrimination often led to retaliation rather than resolution. When Martinez finally presented his complete findings to Harrison, the CEO sat in stunned silence. The report documented not just a single incident of discrimination, but an elaborate system designed to shield the company from accountability while preserving the appearance of commitment to diversity. "How widespread is this?" Harrison asked finally. "The specific complaint suppression mechanism appears limited to customer allegations of discrimination," Martinez explained. "But the culture that allows it exists throughout the organization." "And Reynolds?" Martinez slid a folder across the desk. "Her personnel file contains multiple buried warnings about customer selectivity dating back 15 years. 3 different supervisors documented concerns before Williams took over her department. After that, all negative documentation stops." Harrison rubbed his face. "So it's not just Reynolds. William, Whitfield, and potentially others have actively covered up discrimination complaints." "Correct, and our legal exposure is significant. If this information became public, we'd face not just public relations damage, but potentially class action litigation." The conversation shifted to options. Firing Reynolds might address the specific incident with Jasmine Washington, but it wouldn't solve the systemic issues. The cover-up implicated multiple levels of management and revealed fundamental flaws in how the company handled discrimination complaints. "We need comprehensive reform," Harrison concluded. "New reporting mechanisms, independent review of discrimination complaints, mandatory training at all levels, and accountability measures with real consequences." "That won't be popular with certain board members," Martinez warned. Harrison's expression hardened. "I'm not asking for their permission. This stops now." As Martinez left the meeting, Harrison remained at his desk, wrestling with the implications. The investigation had revealed problems far deeper than one biased flight attendant. Addressing them would require confronting entrenched interests, changing company culture, and potentially removing several senior managers. The challenge was formidable, but the alternative, continuing to enable discrimination while pretending to value diversity, was unacceptable. Harrison had built his career on turning around troubled operations. Now he faced perhaps his greatest leadership test, transforming his company's approach to equity and inclusion in the face of powerful resistance. What Harrison didn't anticipate was how quickly the decision would be forced. That evening, key sections of Martinez's report were leaked to the Wall Street Journal, sending Ameristar's stock plummeting and triggering an emergency board meeting that would determine not just Reynolds' fate, but potentially the future direction of the entire company. The Ameristar boardroom, typically a sanctuary of corporate decorum, had transformed into a battleground. Emergency meeting procedures had been invoked, bringing together all 12 board members on just 4 hours' notice. Some participated via secure video link, their faces projected on the wall-mounted screens, while others sat around the massive mahogany table where CEO William Harrison now stood, Martinez's leaked report in hand. "The stock has dropped 18% since the Journal published excerpts of this investigation," Board Chairman Richard Keller announced grimly. At 72, Keller represented the old guard of airline executives, men who had risen through the ranks when diversity meant having a few women in customer service roles. "We're facing a full-blown crisis." "The crisis isn't the leak," Harrison countered. "It's what the investigation uncovered: systematic discrimination and deliberate concealment of complaints. That's the actual problem we need to address." Board member Eleanor Phillips, one of only 2 women on the board, nodded in agreement. "William's right. This goes beyond one flight attendant or one incident. Martinez's report documents institutional failures." "Let's not overreact," interjected James Whitfield, VP of Operations, and Bethany Reynolds' connection to the upper echelons. "Every company has customer service issues. Reynolds has been with us for 22 years. Are we really going to destroy her career over one passenger's complaint that went viral? This isn't about one complaint, Harrison insisted, frustration evident in his voice. The report documents dozens of similar incidents and an intentional system for burying discrimination complaints. Reynolds is merely the most visible symptom of a deeper problem. The debate intensified, revealing a fundamental division within Ameristar's leadership. The progressive faction, led by Harrison and supported by newer board members, pushed for comprehensive reform, beginning with accountability for Reynolds and those who had protected her. The traditionalists, including several long-serving board members with personal connections to Reynolds, advocated for a more cautious approach focused on public relations rather than internal change. The simplest solution is to offer Reynolds early retirement, suggested Bradley Cooper, the airline's longest-serving board member. Give her a generous package to leave quietly. We issue a statement about our commitment to customer service, implement some additional training, and move on. Harrison shook his head. That's exactly the approach that got us here, sweeping problems under the rug instead of addressing them. And Reynolds has already made it clear she won't go quietly. Indeed, Reynolds had escalated her media campaign, portraying herself as a scapegoat for broader societal tensions. Her latest interview included veiled threats. If they want to make an example of me, they should remember I know how many other executives have made similar judgment calls that could be misinterpreted in today's climate. The implication was clear. She possessed information about other instances of discrimination that had been covered up and would expose them if terminated. As the board meeting entered its third hour without resolution, Ameristar's stock continued to decline. Financial analysts were issuing downgrades, predicting that the controversy would impact passenger numbers in the crucial summer travel season. The company's carefully cultivated image as a progressive, customer-focused airline was unraveling by the hour. Meanwhile, Jasmine Washington faced mounting personal consequences. After 2 weeks on administrative leave, her employer had made it permanent, citing business necessity rather than any performance issues. The financial strain, combined with ongoing harassment from Reynolds' supporters, created almost unbearable pressure. Yet something unexpected was happening simultaneously. Patricia Fleming, the retired civil rights attorney who had first encouraged Jasmine to file a complaint, had organized a passenger coalition demanding accountability from Ameristar. The group included travelers of all backgrounds who had experienced or witnessed discrimination on flights. This isn't about one passenger or one flight attendant, Fleming told reporters. It's about whether corporations can continue to market themselves as diverse and inclusive while allowing discriminatory practices to persist. The coalition launched a social media campaign sharing similar experiences across multiple airlines, transforming Jasmine's individual complaint into a conversation about industry-wide racial bias in air travel. Major civil rights organizations issued statements of support, and several celebrities announced they would boycott Ameristar until meaningful changes were implemented. The pressure intensified when Reynolds, frustrated by the board's indecision, gave an unauthorized interview to a transportation industry publication. In a stunning miscalculation, she admitted that differential treatment of passengers was unofficially tolerated and even encouraged for efficiency reasons. Let's be honest, she stated. Flight attendants make quick assessments dozens of times per flight. We're trained to prioritize passengers most likely to be frequent flyers or upgrade to premium services in the future. It's not written policy, but everyone knows the score. The interview, intended to normalize her behavior, instead confirmed the systemic nature of the discrimination Jasmine had experienced. It also directly contradicted Ameristar's public statements about equal service standards. When the board reconvened the following morning, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The financial impact had doubled overnight, with major institutional investors demanding explanations. Corporate clients were reconsidering their contracts for employee travel, and the Department of Transportation had announced a review of Ameristar's compliance with anti-discrimination regulations. We no longer have the luxury of debate, Harrison told the subdued board members. Reynolds' interview confirmed exactly what Martinez's investigation found. Discriminatory practices aren't isolated incidents, but part of an unofficial culture. We can either address this comprehensively or watch our company's reputation and value continue to collapse. Even the most resistant board members now recognized the severity of the situation. The question was no longer whether to act, but how extensive the response should be. Harrison presented a bold proposal: terminate Reynolds immediately for violating company policy and damaging the company's reputation. Accept resignations from Thomas Williams and others implicated in covering up discrimination complaints. Implement comprehensive anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff. Establish an independent review process for discrimination complaints, and create a passenger bill of rights with specific commitments to equal treatment. This will be expensive and disruptive in the short term, Harrison acknowledged. But the alternative is continuing damage to our brand, potential regulatory action, and almost certain class action litigation. After intense discussion, the board voted 8-4 to approve Harrison's plan. The dissenters included Whitfield, who announced his resignation immediately following the vote. For Jasmine Washington, watching these developments from the sidelines was surreal. What had begun as a request for warm baby formula had catalyzed a fundamental transformation within one of America's largest airlines. The cost had been enormous: her job, her privacy, and months of stress. But the impact extended far beyond her personal experience. As she watched Harrison's press conference announcing Reynolds' termination and the company's comprehensive reform initiative, Jasmine felt a complex mix of vindication, relief, and lingering sadness for all that had been lost in the process. The turning point had arrived, but the journey was far from over. 1 year after Flight 1242, Jasmine Washington stood at a podium in the Ameristar corporate auditorium, surveying the attentive faces of 200 airline executives, customer service directors, and flight attendants from across the industry. Behind her, a large screen displayed the conference title, Transforming Air Travel, Building Equity at 30,000 Feet. What began as a mother's request for warm formula, she began, revealed systemic problems that many had experienced but few had successfully challenged. Today, I'm proud to report that Ameristar isn't just acknowledging these issues, they're leading the industry in addressing them. The journey to this moment had been neither simple nor straightforward. In the days following the board's decision, CEO William Harrison had made the bold choice to personally announce Bethany Reynolds' termination in a press conference that didn't mince words. Our investigation confirmed that Ms. Reynolds violated our service standards by providing differential treatment based on race, he stated unequivocally. More concerning, we discovered that complaints about this behavior had been systematically suppressed by certain members of management. This represents a failure at multiple levels that we are committed to correcting. The announcement triggered immediate backlash from Reynolds' supporters, who continued to portray her as a victim of political correctness. Several conservative commentators called for boycotts of Ameristar, and the airline briefly lost bookings in certain markets. Yet Harrison remained resolute, rolling out comprehensive reforms that went far beyond addressing a single incident. Ameristar implemented mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, established an independent ombudsman to review discrimination complaints, revised performance metrics to emphasize equal service standards, and increased recruitment of underrepresented groups in leadership positions. Most significantly, Harrison made the unprecedented move of offering Jasmine Washington a position as diversity consultant to help shape these initiatives. The role capitalized on her marketing expertise while providing a platform to influence meaningful change. I was skeptical at first, Jasmine admitted during a private conversation after accepting the position. I worried about being a token or having my experience commodified. That's a fair concern, Harrison acknowledged. But we need someone who understands both the passenger experience and corporate communication. Someone who won't let us settle for superficial changes. For Jasmine, the opportunity represented both professional rehabilitation and purposeful work. Her previous employer had reluctantly offered to reinstate her after the full investigation became public, but the relationship had been irreparably damaged. Several progressive marketing firms had subsequently recruited her, recognizing the value of her unique perspective and public profile. Meanwhile, Patricia Fleming channeled her outrage into establishing the Air Passenger Equity Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to documenting discrimination in air travel and advocating for industry-wide reforms. With Jasmine serving on the advisory board, the foundation quickly became an influential voice in transportation policy discussions. The ripple effects extended beyond Ameris Star. Other airlines, recognizing the potential financial and reputational risks of similar incidents, began reviewing their own complaint handling procedures and service training. The Air Transport Association, the industry's largest trade organization, created new passenger rights guidelines that explicitly addressed equal treatment standards. 6 months after her termination, Bethany Reynolds granted a reflective interview to a psychology magazine exploring unconscious bias. The tone differed dramatically from her earlier defensive posture. "I never saw myself as prejudiced," she explained. "But looking back at consistent patterns in how I assessed and prioritized passengers, I can't deny the role bias played in my decision-making. The training we received emphasized efficiency above all else, which became an unconscious permission structure for discriminatory shortcuts." While stopping short of a direct apology to Jasmine, Reynolds acknowledged that the incident had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and the culture that had enabled her behavior for decades. For Jasmine, the most meaningful outcome wasn't corporate policy changes or professional opportunities, but the knowledge that her son Elijah would grow up in a world slightly more aware of how discrimination operates and the importance of confronting it. On the first anniversary of Flight 1242, Ameris Star's transformation was reflected in improved diversity metrics, decreased discrimination complaints, and higher customer satisfaction scores across demographic groups. The initial financial hit had been substantial, but the airline stock had not only recovered but increased as investors recognized the value of Harrison's leadership during the crisis. The industry conference where Jasmine now spoke represented the culmination of this remarkable journey. From humiliated passenger to respected advocate, helping reshape airline culture. "The test of meaningful change isn't what companies say in their diversity statements," she told the audience, "but how they respond when those values are challenged. True transformation happens when organizations have the courage to acknowledge failures, hold people accountable regardless of status, and implement systemic reforms that address root causes rather than symptoms." As she concluded her keynote, Jasmine offered a perspective that resonated far beyond the specific context of air travel. What happened on Flight 1242 wasn't just about warm formula or one flight attendant's bias. It was about power, accountability, and whose experiences we validate. By speaking up despite the personal cost, documenting what happened despite attempts to discredit me, and persisting despite institutional resistance, I discovered something profound. Systems designed to perpetuate inequality can be changed, but only when we refuse to accept the status quo as inevitable. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Jasmine, but for the principles she represented. That ordinary individuals, when armed with truth and determination, can catalyze transformation even within the most entrenched systems. As she left the stage, Jasmine reflected on the extraordinary journey from that terrible flight to this moment of vindication. The cost had been high, but the impact extended far beyond her individual experience to touch countless passengers who would never know her name, but would benefit from the changes she helped create. Have you ever stood up against discrimination despite the personal risk? What do you think needs to change in how companies handle complaints about unequal treatment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found Jasmine's journey inspiring, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about everyday heroes challenging injustice. Remember that speaking truth to power isn't just about getting justice for yourself. It's about creating a more equitable world for everyone. Thank you for watching, and may we all find the courage to stand firm when confronted with discrimination in our own lives. Jasmine Washington's journey teaches us that confronting discrimination requires more than courage. It demands strategic documentation, persistent advocacy, and building coalitions. When institutions prioritize image over justice, change often starts with one person refusing to accept unequal treatment as normal. The airline's transformation demonstrates how accountability can ripple through entire industries when someone holds their ground despite intimidation tactics. This story highlights how discrimination often hides behind standard procedures and service variations, making it simultaneously pervasive yet deniable. Breaking this cycle requires both individual courage and institutional leadership willing to acknowledge uncomfortable truths. The most meaningful change comes not from policies alone, but from shifting culture and power dynamics. The backlash Jasmine faced reminds us that challenging established systems comes with personal costs. Yet her persistence created lasting impact for countless travelers who will never experience what she endured. Sometimes justice isn't just about individual vindication, but creating better systems for everyone who follows. Have you witnessed or experienced discrimination that others dismissed? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Remember that by sharing these stories, we help others recognize injustice and find courage to speak up. Thank you for watching, and may we all contribute to building a more equitable world.